The inspiration to the 1992 movie Candyman was inspired by the murder of 52-year-old Ruthie Mae McCoy in 1987. The movie was filmed in Cabrini Green housing complexes. A PhD student is looking into an urban legend about a hook-wielding hand murderer referred to as Candyman. Candyman came through the mirror as well as the murderers that killed Ruthie Mae McCoy. What does a fictional horror film about a man covered in bees wielding a hook killing innocent people have to do with an unsolved murder case from the 1980s? Well, more than you would think is even creepier, because in the movie, in order to summon Candyman, one must say his name 5 times in a mirror. Who was Ruthie Mae McCoy? McCoy was born in Hughes, Arkansas on January 13, 1935, and was one of 9 children. As a child, her and her family, much like many Southern families at the time, moved to the south side of Chicago. She attended Phillips High School briefly. She started to display signs of mental illness in her 20s. Her family, however, did not know the extent of her illness but stated that she would talk to herself often and was prone to bursting into anger. After her prior apartment in the Humboldt Park neighborhood flooded in 1983, Ruthie first relocated to Alba Homes apartment 1109 at 1140 West 13th Street. She moved to a high-rise apartment with caution since she was afraid of the risks that were common in this area. Shootings and burglary were frequent in the region. When her desire to relocate to the south side, where her family was denied, she decided to take the apartment on the west side. The Chicago PD got a call from McCoy on the evening of April 22, 1987 between 8:50 p.m. and 9:05 p.m. The dispatcher was baffled by the urgent call. McCoy reportedly told them that someone had thrown the cabinet down and they want to come through the bathroom, according to recordings. The dispatcher didn't instantly draw the conclusion, even though we now know that this indicated that the intruders were breaking into the bathroom medicine cabinet. The dispatcher UT the call in as a neighbor disturbance. A police car was dispatched in response to the request despite the uncertainty. What happened next was a puzzling act of carelessness. Unfortunately, the dispatcher recorded McCoy's call as a neighbor disturbance rather than a break-in. Perhaps the inaccurate reporting can be used to justify the officer's lack of urgency when visiting Alba Homes. The Chicago PD received further 911 calls from residents who claimed to have heard gunfire and shouting before the police ever arrived. After some time, several police officers showed up at McCoy's house, but when they knocked on her door, nobody responded. They left. You would expect the officers on the scene would try to get inside her apartment given McCoy's panicked phone call and the subsequent reports from neighbors. Another of McCoy's neighbors would call Chicago PD the following evening. According to the neighbor, McCoy would typically say hello to her twice a day, in the morning and in the afternoon, but she hadn't seen McCoy since the day before. On April 23, Deborah Lasley, a neighbor of Ruthie's, called 911 concerned of where Ruthie was. This prompted Chicago police officers and Chase security to go back to her apartment. Once again they attempted to knock with no response. It was at this point the officer suggested that maybe they should break the door down. The Chicago Housing Authority, however, was afraid of a lawsuit discouraged Chicago PD from breaking down the door, and so for the second time the officers left the Abla housing projects. Still concerned about Ruthie McCoy's whereabouts the next day, April 24, Deborah did not call the police because of their lack of concern. She went to the housing office that afternoon. A housing official arrived at apartment 1109 with a carpenter who drilled through the lock in the door. What they found was nothing short of tragic. When they opened the door, poor Ruthie was found face down, lying dead on her bedroom floor. She had been shot 4 times, one to her left shoulder, one in her left thigh, her abdomen, and then another gunshot through her arm, passing through her liver and exiting her abdomen. No one knows the true details of events that took place on that fateful day, but 2 young men, Edward Turner, 18, and John Honduras, 21, were charged with her murder, home invasion, armed robbery, armed violence, and residential burglary. Witnesses claimed that they saw the 2 men carrying McCoy's 19-inch color TV and rocking chair around the project in the early morning hours after her death. Due to lack of evidence, the charges against the 2 men were found not guilty after 2 years of the trial. Ruthie's daughter Vernita sued Chicago Housing Authority on the grounds of faulty design and easy access into the apartments. Sadly, crimes committed in Chicago's public housing buildings rarely received extensive media attention, especially when the victim was a black woman who was mentally ill. Detectives discovered that the murderers had broken through the medicine cabinet in the bathroom to access the house from the adjacent flat. Although the method of admission may have astonished some individuals back then, ABLA locals had a different take on events. Before McCoy's slaying, people had been breaking into apartments using medicine cabinets. Break-ins through the cabinets and the bathrooms were not all that uncommon. Residents would frequently barricade their bathroom doors at night in case anyone tried to get in via the cabinets. Various articles state how easy it was to move from one apartment to the other, via the pipe chase which was accessible. It was a common practice for vacant apartments to be squatted in or used by drug dealers and other criminals. Overall, this is a really sad. Chicago Housing Authority and Chicago Police should have done more to protect Ruthie. They knew of her mental issues and knew that she had requested to stay in an area where she could be closer to her family, where she would have been more safe. Ruthie was an innocent soul who should have not been ignored. She had a difficult life but still tried to remain positive. Ruthie Mae McCoy was a perfect illustration of how our institutions let down people with mental illnesses. She would later be identified as having residual-type schizophrenia, a diagnosis that occurs when a person has previously had schizophrenic episodes but is not currently displaying symptoms. If Candyman hadn't come out, maybe the Ruthie Mae McCoy case would have been forgotten. In addition to sharing details about her murder, such as a setting in the Chicago slums and deceitful bathroom mirrors, the movie also featured a character with the last name McCoy. It appears that the real-life story of Ruthie Mae McCoy will continue to be remembered in our culture given the release of another Candyman movie, which was released in the summer of 2021, and the presence of another protagonist with the last name McCoy.